Be the envy of the neighborhood. 860 KKAT, where the grass is always greener. Welcome to Gardening Utah. Here's composter and show hoster, Jana Francis.
Welcome to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis. Every week here on Gardening Utah, we give you gardening inspiration and advice from experts across the state. We talk about vegetables, flowers, trees, shrubs, and of course, your lawn. Thank you for listening. I hope this show is something that you'll look forward to checking in with every week. Whether you're a beginner or an expert, Gardening Utah aims to inspire you and keep you in the know of what tasks you should be accomplishing in your yard and meet amazing, informative experts along the way. This show airs on the radio on the weekends here in Utah at 10 a.m. on 860 AM KKAT, and episodes drop every weekend on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, so hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. On today's show, we are going to put our lawns to bed for the fall. Eric Marble from Chanshare Sod Farms is going to tell us everything we need to know that we should be doing to our lawns right now. And he's going to talk about why it's actually the most important time of year and the best time of the year to put down a fertilizer, most important treatment of the whole season. So he's going to talk all about why that is and the science behind it, and also going to talk about what we should be doing with our sprinklers. How much water does the grass really need in the month of October? I know we've had a little bit of rain, so mine are completely off. And all the science behind exactly what we should be doing. So that's what we're going to be learning today, an encore episode from episode 26. But before we get into that, let's head on over to the tip of the week.
860 KKAT with your Gardening Utah tip of the week.
My tip of the week is don't throw out all of the dead leaves that accumulate in your yard. Now, as surely as the seasons change, autumn mornings, you'll be driving up and down the street and witnessing other homeowners bent over those triangular rusty tined rakes, and they're endlessly scraping all the withered foliage into tarps and onto heavy-duty garbage bags. And then you're seeing your streets lined with garbage bags filled with leaves. Now, leaf raking is an optional exercise. Okay, so listen, a thick layer of leaves should never be left to smother your grass growing beneath. Never. You always want to make sure that you handle the leaves on your lawn. But raking is not the only or even the easiest method to protect your lawn's health. You can mulch your leaves with your lawnmower. You mince them to literal shreds with your lawnmower and leave them on the grass. Now, I'm talking a thin layer, I'm not talking a thick layer. And compared to raking, mulching leaves is so much less work. So you're going to want to leave a thin layer of leaves on your lawn and mulch them with your lawnmower. And plenty of lawnmowers on the market right now have mulching capability. You can easily outfit a conventional non-mulching mower with a serrated blade designed for mulching leaves, and you can mulch them with any type of lawnmower, although it may take a few passes to do the job well. But no matter what type of lawnmower you own, you want to set the lawn mowing blade to its highest setting and remove the bag that protects the clippings. That's assuming you're going to spread these along your lawn. You're going to want to mow and shred these leaves into pieces that are about a 1/2 inch in diameter, which is more or less the size of a dime. So, as mentioned, depending on the volume of leaves that have fallen on your lawn, some people have, neighbor trees that are going like crazy and they've got piles. And some people like me, you've got kind of a thin layer as it is. Really easy to run over with the lawnmower a couple times and get them down to that those dime size pieces. And so when you're done, the leaf shreds will just kind of fall between the blades of grass and they'll decompose and create great mulch and nutrients for your lawn over the coming year. Now, if you would like to put these leaves into the garden, you can do the exact same thing and just, rake them up. You could even put the bag on the lawnmower and have the leaves go into the bag and just keep shredding those and just layer those out into your garden, mix them in your garden beds or your raised beds. And that is a much better way to utilize these amazing leaves that fall that really are excellent nutrients for the soil.
And that's your Gardening Utah tip of the week, brought to you by the Advocates. If you're in an accident, you deserve an advocate. Call 801-355-5550 or visit UtahAdvocates.com. Never miss a tip for your garden and never miss an episode. The Gardening Utah Podcast with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT.
By the way, speaking of leaves, how gorgeous are the leaves this year? Have you noticed? I feel like for some reason this year, the leaves are just a more vibrant color. Everything from the yellows, oranges, and reds. I've just noticed, especially in my yard, my crab apples are just these amazing shades of yellow and orange, and one of them is kind of this gorgeous red, and my burning bushes are going crazy. They're just the most vibrant I feel like they've ever been. It's kind of interesting, but that's definitely something I've been noticing. And now it's time for a shout out. I just read, right before I started recording this show today, I read the coolest review that just hit Apple Podcasts. So I've just got to say thanks, and a shout out to Brady times 18 is the username. And they say, just what Utah needs. If you live in Utah, this podcast is for you. This show is a lot of fun to listen to, but be warned though, you might learn something. Top-notch guests. Brady, thank you so much. That totally made my day today. And yes, I have to agree about the guests as well, because listen, we've had some of the most amazing people on this show that I've learned so much from, and many of them have just become really great friends with. So couldn't agree more about having amazing guests. And we have some really great ones coming up in future episodes as well. Can't really spill the beans yet, but we have some amazing guests coming up that I'm super excited about. So we're tackling our lawn care in today's show, and what else is going on in the garden? My gosh, I have been a mad woman cleaning up and putting the garden away. I tell you what, it's kind of a bummer. I do feel like it froze a lot earlier this year than past years. In fact, I remember a couple years ago having tomatoes in the garden on Halloween and going out and picking a few. Kind of crazy. But this year, now I have quite a big garden, as I've mentioned before, so it's taken a lot to put it all away, and we just have a little bit left to go. But I have been processing tomatoes like a mad woman. I've got all the green tomatoes. I picked every single one that I could, and I've been saving them all and kind of making tomato sauce every couple days to just, use up the fresh ones that we're just not eating. But yeah, it's also time of year to get those spring bulbs in. So your tulips, daffodils, hyacinth, crocus, anything like that, this is the perfect time to get those in the ground. And I'm going to be doing just a couple new fresh varieties of daffodils that I'm really excited to just try. Just kind of the more funky looking ones. So I'm kind of excited to put some of those in a couple days. And this weekend, I will be planting my garlic. So it is that time of year that you can go get your garlic in the ground. This was actually my first full year. So I put garlic in the ground last year around this time. And this is my full, my full cycle of my very first big garlic harvest. So last year I planted 100 bulbs of garlic. And I tell you what, it's been so much fun to have fresh garlic. I still have about 3 different bulbs left out of all of that, but we have just been using it up like crazy once we harvested last July. So garlic is so easy. I talked about it in a tip of the week. I believe it was in episode 25 or so. But anyway, garlic is amazing, fresh. It's so different. And I just love that. So if you're inspired at all, this is the perfect time to get garlic in the ground, and it'll come up for you next July. In fact, the other thing that I had fun with my garlic this last year is the garlic scapes. So as the garlic grows, about 2 weeks before you're ready to harvest that garlic, it throws up a seed head, basically, which are kind of a delicacy, and they're called garlic scapes. And you cut them off, and then you can harvest your garlic about 2 weeks later as the tips start to die off. But the garlic scapes, my gosh, I had so much fun with them this year. They taste, imagine they're like the texture of a green bean, but they have a garlicky flavor, and it's mild, but it's amazing. So anyway, we will be right back after this with Eric Marble from Chanshare Sod Farms, putting our lawns to bed for the winter. Stay with us.
She's more than just gardening puns and sage advice. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT. Gardening Utah, available wherever you get your podcasts and at 860kkat.com/garden. Here's Jana Francis.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis. And listen, we are in for a real fall treat today because Eric Marble from Chanshare Sod Farms is here with us. I'm so excited to have him here today. You know, Chanshare Sod Farms has been growing a beautiful turf here in Utah and the Intermountain West since 1979. And Eric was with us on episode 13 and 15 of this year, giving us all the summer lawn tips. And now he's back to join us today. Eric, thank you so much for taking your free time. And I'm so happy to have you here on Gardening Utah.
I'm so glad to do this. It was such a fun time last time that I'm just happy to do it again.
Oh, awesome. Well, so when you were on last, we promised everybody that we'd have you back and that we would you would give everybody the tips and tricks that they need to do to put their lawns to bed for the fall and winter. And so we're going to do that in today's episode. But where we want to really start is, you know, I know this is your pet peeve too, and it's totally mine. And there's so many sprinklers still going right now, and water conservation. Obviously, when was the last time either of us saw a drop of rain?
I know it's been a while, and it's so interesting. You know, I mean, we live in such an arid state, and it's important for us, like, all the time to be conservation minded. And so, like, I just think that people don't understand how much better it is on their lawn if they manage it with water conservation in mind. And so, like, you're right, we're halfway through October right now. And with the cooler temperatures and everything, grass just does not need as much water in order to stay vibrant green. And actually, if you put a lot of water on it right now, it's going to cause it to need more water next year. And so being conservation minded right now, especially in the fall, is something that is just super important in order for you to create a Waterwise lawn next year.
Okay, so what's your tip there as far as adjusting how we're watering and adjusting that sprinkler system? What should we be doing right now?
Well, you know, it's really important to read your lawn, but on the majority of lawns in Utah right now, in the Intermountain region right now, you just don't need as much water. In the middle of the summer, we recommend that you put 1 inch of water every 6 to 7 days, and you water deeply and you water less frequently. When you get down to the late fall, that spreads out to where you only need 1 inch about every 14 days. So you really shouldn't be watering more than once or twice in October. And if you water deeply, then that should be enough to keep your lawn green all the way through to the end of the season.
So that is an amazing tip, Utah. So let's just make sure we all go out and adjust our sprinklers right now. Literally stop what you're doing and go do it if you haven't done it yet, because we all get distracted and we'll move on to something else. It's just so important for water conservation, especially when we just have not had the rainfall this year.
Yeah, you know, I mean, last year we had a really great winter. And so because of that, we were stocked up for the rain year this year. But this year it's actually been pretty dry. And because we had water last year, we've been able to carry it through. And because we've got a lot of national issues going right now, we don't see a lot of talk in the media about conservation and about water, but it's super important right now. And especially in October, like, most municipalities will turn off secondary water either the beginning or the middle of October. But some residents in Utah run off of culinary water for their landscapes instead of the secondary water. And so they could literally have water in their landscapes all year long. But at the beginning of October, man, you should be able to water once really deeply. And then if your lawn needs it, if it's like turning yellow or kind of that bluish gray that you see in the middle of the summer when it's super hot, then you can give it one more good, healthy drink and then turn off your sprinklers for the year. I mean, it's so much better for your lawn to do it that way. And especially when you're not in the middle of the heat of the summer, it helps it because it just lets it kind of slow its pace down as far as growing, and it lets it get ready for the colder temperatures in the winter.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we want. We don't want to be encouraging blade growth right now. We just kind of want to be, it's time to go night-night.
Right. Definitely the blade growth. Now, root growth is a different thing. We do want to encourage root growth. And because your lawn can actually continue to grow its roots in the winter, what happens is the freeze level only goes about 4 inches deep. So in the middle of the winter, you've got this layer of frozen dirt, but below 4 inches, a lot of times it's warm enough that those roots can actually continue growing during the winter. And so that's why my second big tip is to make sure that in the end of October, usually around Halloween or later, that you apply some winterizer fertilizer. And winterizer fertilizer has a well-balanced NPK value, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And that helps the overall plant, but most of all, it throws that energy down into those roots so they can push into the soil. And the further they get into the soil, the more likely you're actually going to get more root growth during the winter, so that again, when it comes springtime next year and the snow melts, you've already got a well-established root bed and you're well on your way to having a Waterwise landscape.
And I remember you mentioning to our listeners last summer that this fertilizer in the fall is the most important of the entire year, even if you don't do it any other time of the year.
Certainly, that is totally true. Like we have some residential homeowners that just put one application on the year. They put it on a little bit heavier in the winterizer fertilizer after Halloween, and that's sufficient for their landscape. It really just depends on how much you use your landscape and how much you use your lawn. If it's like a sports lawn where people are out there playing soccer and football and there's a lot of heavy traffic on there, then you may need more than that. But we recommend that you put no more than 4 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet on for one season or one full year. So if you're going to do one application, do it after Halloween and figure it so that you've got about 4 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. And then what will happen again, as long as you do it late in the season when it's a lot colder and there's not a lot of blade growth, then it will help it to establish itself better in that water table zone that's down below the root or down below the top soil level. And man, it just makes for a much more water-wise lawn.
Absolutely. Now, what are your tips as far as where and how to pick out this fertilizer? Is there a specific brand that you're privy to, or where should we send people to go make sure they're putting the right fertilizer on their lawn this time of year?
You can get, sometimes it's kind of confusing because when you go to look at a fertilizer bag, it's got those 3 numbers on it. The first one is nitrogen, the second is phosphorus, and the third one is potassium. The nitrogen helps the blades to green up and promotes blade growth. And so you want to pick one that has a lower nitrogen value. But really a winterizer fertilizer, a good one, is going to be one that has approximate equal values of all 3 of those. And you can find that at any home improvement store or hardware store. Just look for one that has the lowest nitrogen content, but a balanced number. So if you could find like 12, 12, 12, or a 24, 24, 24, or something like that, like that's the best. And a lot of them will actually say on their winterizer. And if it says winterizer on there, then, it really doesn't matter what brand. I know that some of the local stores have their own proprietary blends or their proprietary brands. But really, as long as you got a balanced NPK value, those are pretty close, and the nitrogen value is lower than normal, then it's going to work and be great for a winterizer fertilizer.
Fantastic. Now, do you suggest that you plan out the fertilizer? So we know that we need to do this after Halloween, but do we plan that out when we know there's going to be some rainfall, or do we need to worry about it getting sort of watered in, or is that just fine for this time of year?
At this point in the year, you really don't have to worry about it. You're probably not going to have to mow very many more times. And so what I would say is do your final mowing and then put your winterizer fertilizer down. The only big thing is you probably want to put it down before it starts snowing. And that's so that it actually gets to the grass and to the roots. If it snows and that top layer of soil freezes, then all of those nutrients don't get down to the roots. And so you just want to make sure that it's applied before the snow and before the ground freezes.
Okay, that's perfect. Now, what about aeration? That's obviously a good thing to do this time of year, I believe. How do we plan that out with the fertilization and the last mowing?
So generally what you want to do is do the aeration after the last mowing, but before the last fertilization. And what aeration does is it opens up the soil so that more air, water, and nutrients get down into the roots. And so if you do the aeration before you apply fertilizer, then that just gives the fertilizer quicker access to the root level. And so, and aeration, you can do it 1 or 2 times a year. And it really just depends on like the traffic that's on your lawn. If you have a high traffic lawn, then you probably want to do it twice in a year. You would want to do it like late in the season, sometime in October, and then you want to do it early or late in the spring the next year. And basically aeration, the important thing about aeration is compaction. If you have clay soil, then it's going to compact a lot quicker. And if it compacts, then that restricts the air, water, and nutrients getting down to the root level. And so what the aeration does is that opens that up. And if you have sandy soil, you're going to have less compaction, so you don't need to aerate as much. Sandy loam soil is the most desired soil for a lawn in the Intermountain region.
Yeah.
And if you have sandy loam soil, you can get away with once a year. But again, it really just depends on how high traffic your lawn has.
Gotcha. And I've got this one section of my lawn that I walk out to my chicken coop probably 5 or 6 times a day. And so I'm getting this path that's starting to get a little worn down, and I'm thinking I might need to make a little pathway here or something to give the lawn a rest. I don't know.
Yeah, it's, and especially like people who have dogs that are in the yard, those dogs generally, they'll do like a single track or to wherever they're going. And so you'll see that type of compaction with animals. And then a lot of times, like what you're saying, when people go to specific areas in their yard. And so, yeah, it is important to watch those. And if you watch those areas and those areas seem to be getting compacted, then that's a clear sign that you need to do some kind of either aeration or figure out a way in order to like put a path in and take the lawn out in that section or whatever. Just do something that makes it a little bit more functional.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, we'll be right back here on Gardening Utah. We're going to have more fall lawn tips and tricks. Stay with us.
860 KKAT with Jana Francis and Gardening Utah, where it's always mulch time. She really does have the nicest yard on the block. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis, and I have Eric Marble with Chanshare Sod Farms here, and we are talking lawn in the fall. And we're going to talk this segment about mowing tips, and Eric's going to give us everything we need to know on how to get the lawn mowed properly before we get all of this crazy snow, hopefully, on our lawns.
Yeah, certainly. Like the fall, as I've mentioned before, is you can do the best in making your lawn a Waterwise lawn by the way that you maintain it through the summer, but you can make the biggest effect in the fall. And so, as we've talked about before, you want to decrease your watering as early as you can. And again, it's okay to stress it out before the winter because you're not going to have that huge blade growth and the root growth as the temperatures drop. But mowing is another thing. Generally, in the middle of the summer, we recommend that you mow at a height of 2 to 3 inches, which is a little longer than generally people do. But that longer mow height allows the blades to actually shield the soil. And then if it shades the soil, then there's not as much evaporation. And so it retains more of the moisture. But in the fall, you want to start decreasing your blade height. And so the last mowing that you do in the year should be the shortest. And so you want to go either 1 inch or 1.5 inch, somewhere in there for your last mowing of the year. And that, again, you're decreasing gradually the blade height. And so that doesn't put your lawn into shock. And that allows it to focus on the roots more during the winter rather than the blades that are up above the grass or up above the soil level.
Well, and you said something there that I don't know that I've ever considered, although it makes a ton of sense, is shock. I mean, I've seen so many through the years, you see people that are mowing lawn that's just way, been ignored for so long, but they're mowing it so short.
Yeah.
And it's really best to kind of take it in thirds, correct?
Right. You never want to mow more than 1/3 of the blade at a time. And that will allow the plant to adjust without putting it into shock. But if you do any more than 1/3 of that blade, then it's going to go into shock. And when it goes into shock, then all of a sudden it says, oh man, I've got to regrow myself. And so then it puts all this energy back into building up that blade and growing it fast because it knows it needs to survive. But if you just do 1/3, it's like, oh, okay, that was a nice little haircut. I feel good, instead of the, man, you chopped it and I hate you. So yeah, definitely no more than 1/3 of the blade at a time.
Yeah,
and
go read
again,
about it.
Yeah, the very last mowing that you do of the year should be the shortest one.
Okay, so on this last mowing, are we mulching or are we bagging?
Well, it's really up to you. If you have a mulching lawnmower, then I would say go ahead and mulch it. If you don't, then definitely bag it. What you want to prevent is any kind of clumps of grass, of dead grass, still being on your lawn, because that can cause snow mold when the snow comes. And so you definitely need to mulch it if you're going to leave it on the lawn. But don't make sure that there are no clumps anywhere. So if you see clumps of grass, then take a metal rake and just rake it out, and do that before the snow flies. And a lot of people will ask me, they're like, well, what do we do about all these leaves? We don't know whether to mulch them or not. And it's the same thing. The biggest thing is you don't want to prevent any air, water, or nutrients getting down to those roots. And if you're mulching so many leaves that plant material can't break down fast enough to get into the roots before the snow flies, then that's not going to be good, because when the snow melts, then you're going to have kind of this organic barrier for the air, water, and nutrients to get down to the roots. And so our recommendation with leaves is to actually rake them off of the lawn rather than mulching them in. If you don't get so many that you can mulch it and there aren't any patches left over, like piles, then that might be okay. But again, what you risk is creating an organic material layer that prevents the air, water, and nutrients getting down to the blade. No, getting down to the roots. Thank you.
Exactly. Well, and ironically, my tip of the week recently was, raking up all of the leaves off of your lawn, getting them off there, because that also helps prevent snow mold, no different than raking off the pile of grass that may pile up if you mulch that lawn. But I talked about how if you have a mulching mower or just any mower, get the leaves off the lawn and mow over them a bunch of times, getting them down to about a dime size, and just work those into the planter beds and the garden beds. And that's where the leaves really belong.
Yeah, that organic material does really good in planter beds. But, again, grass is so thick and it knits to itself in cool season grasses. And so sometimes if you put too much organic material on there, then it does create that barrier. And so you're right. Put them in the garden beds, put them in the flower beds. But it's probably best to take them off of your lawn.
Yeah. Now, a question I just noticed pop up here: when they're aerating their lawn, typically we just say to leave the plugs on the lawn, and that's okay to leave those. We don't necessarily need to rake those up, correct?
Correct. And again, the same thing. The thing is that your lawn, the plugs, when you pull those plugs out, you're pulling out roots, you're pulling out dirt. And so those will naturally break down and go back into the soil. And because it's the same organic and plant material, then it has a lot better, easier time breaking those down and incorporating them within the soil. And so, yeah, if you have plug aeration, then make sure that you leave them on so that they can return those nutrients back down into the soil.
Fantastic. Okay, we have 1.5 minutes left of this segment. And so one of the things we were talking about, maybe discussing, was people using ice melt around their sidewalks that borders their grass. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Right. That's a little difficult thing. And a lot of times people will see right around the edges where they've got a sidewalk or a driveway that the grass dies after winter. And the reason being is because they apply a salt-based ice melt. And salt is toxic to plants. Like it can really kill plants. And so if you're going to put an ice melt on those areas that you should then shovel off onto the lawn, make sure you use a nature safe or a pet safe ice melt, which does not have sodium chloride or salt as the acting melting agent, because those will actually help your lawn rather than creating kind of that toxic water that then goes on and kills the plants.
Gotcha. Okay, well, we will be right back with more from Eric Marble with Chanshare Sod Farms. Stay with us.
She's more than just gardening puns and sage advice. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT. 860 KKAT with more of the fastest growing show on radio. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. Jana Francis here with Eric Marble from Chanshare Sod Farms. And we're going to be talking more about the fall tips and tricks to get your lawn put to bed. And Eric, you were just mentioning that you are going to put up some tips and tricks on your, I believe, Facebook page or website on what are the steps you need to do to blow out your sprinklers for the year. So tell our listeners, how do they get a hold of you guys and where can they find this information?
So we have a very active Facebook page. Anytime you've got questions, you can pose it to us on our Facebook page. It's Chanshare, CHANSHARE, Sod Farms. And we've also got a website, chanshare.com, CHANSHARE.com. And we post monthly tips and tricks. We are within the next week, we're going to post a video on how to blow out your sprinklers, because again, at the end of the year, you want to make sure that you turn off your sprinklers, but more important than that you've got all the water out of them so that they don't burst during the winter, and you can start out in the spring with a fully operational system. So again, Facebook page, our website, and then our phone number is 866-SOD-EASY. So SODEASY. So you can either give us a call, you can go onto our website and send us a message there, or you can catch us on Facebook and we can interact with you in those. And we're always posting, different tips and tricks for telling people when to turn their sprinklers off. And my daughter, a couple of years ago, we videoed all this big old series with Audrey. She was 5 years old then, and or 4 years old, and she spent all this time just giving all these tips and tricks. And so it's really cute to see her as she gives all of those tips. Yeah, she's a sweetheart.
They're so cute. Okay, so your sod you can pick up at Home Depot and Lowe's, correct?
Yeah, definitely. So we supply sod to Home Depot and Lowe's, and so you can pick up just like an 8 square foot piece there. If you just have a small area, or give us a call if you have a larger area. Our pallets come in 500 square feet increments, and so if you need a larger area or a smaller area than 500 square feet, you go to Lowe's or Home Depot. If you need something larger than that, then give us a call and we can schedule you.
Oh, that's perfect. And Gardening Utah listeners, if you're in the garden or you're listening to this in the car, I'm going to put all the links to everything Eric just mentioned in the episode notes on Apple Podcast. And this is episode 26 of Gardening Utah. So you can find all the links we just mentioned in the episode notes if you want to go back and just have direct clicks to everything that Eric just mentioned. Okay, so Eric, speaking of buying sod, a big question that we always get this time of year from anybody who's, considering, landscaping a new plot in their yard is, should I seed or sod, and is it too late?
That's a really great question. Fall, because of the lower temperatures and usually increased moisture that we get, fall is one of the best times in order to plant a lawn. Now, in our area, bluegrass is the most widely used grass, and bluegrass seed takes anywhere between 14 and 21 days to germinate. And so that means that from the time that you put the seed down to the time that it starts growing, it's got to have that 14 to 21 days. And so you've got to, if you're going to seed, you've got to make sure that you put that seed down in enough time that the ground isn't going to freeze before the roots take hold and get established. So you want a good month or so of growth before that soil bed starts freezing up. So you're kind of pushing up against a time frame here. So if you were going to do a lawn right now this late in the fall, then I would say the best thing to do is to plant sod rather than to seed, because once that sod gets down, it only takes about a week or so before those roots are really starting to get well established.
Yeah, and when you first put sod down, how many days do you need to stay off of it?
Again, it takes about a week for the roots to sock down in. And once you plant sod, the way you can tell if the roots are socked in is you just go to one corner of a piece of sod and gently try to pull it. And if it doesn't pull up easily, you know that those roots are already knitted down into the soil. So it really depends on how much water it has, how much water is in the soil, and the temperature. And so I can't give you at this point a real good time frame. It can take anywhere between a week and 3 weeks. But usually in the fall, when it's cooler like this, about a week, and you should have those roots established and you can walk on it. But the key is to not have it so wet that when you walk on it, your feet are sinking.
Yes.
And to have those roots actually socked down into the soil bed.
Gotcha. Okay, so I've got a personal question that is my question, and I have seen other people asking this, but recently, and this is a kind of a funny story. About 2 weeks ago, I was pulling out of my driveway, and I look over on my lawn, and I thought, what in the world literally attacked my lawn overnight? I mean, I literally had chunks of soil and grass. I mean, literal chunks on my sidewalk and like on my front porch. I'm thinking, wait a minute, somebody like literally took a hacksaw to my lawn. What is going on? So I put my car in park and I get out and I'm like, what in the world? So I take pictures. I start texting my husband. I'm like, what the heck happened up here? I am so confused. And then he writes back, that was a raccoon. And I'm like, there's literally no way a raccoon could destroy our front lawn. And then he's like, no, I really think it is. Well, trail cam proved it was a bunch of raccoons, not only like 3 raccoons, but also a tag-along skunk was with them. It was almost like it was adopted into the family, and they're just walking around digging up my lawn. Now, so then we go to the neighbor's house and just into their backyard to have a quick visit a couple days later. And he says, I've got these raccoons. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. So then we discover it's all 3 homes along where I live, or right up against the Jordan River is where we live. Mm-hmm. And we've got some families of coons and skunks that are tearing us apart. And I guess they're digging for grubs, right? Yeah,
that's probably it. They're looking for those worms and the pests that are down there in the soil, yeah.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of arguments around, do we put down poison? Do we, what it is that we do? And I tend to kind of lean on the natural side, but I also don't want my lawn dug up. So what are some of the, good ways to treat grubs, and what would you do in this situation?
Yeah, so we recommend that, grubs generally, they don't last through the winter. And so what you want to do is in the spring, sometime around the end of March and at least by the middle of May, you want to apply a season-long grub control. And you can pick that up in any hardware store or home improvement store. And usually each bag will cover about 5,000 square feet. And so that generally will take care of one residential lawn here in Utah. But it's really important that you put it on there. The grubs and those types of worms and pests are going to gravitate towards the areas where they can get the most water and the most plant material. And so, especially when you're in a new subdivision, if you put in a lawn and you've got a lot of dirt around you, then those bugs are going to start coming in there because they know that they've got plant material, they've got things that they can eat, they've got water that's going to keep them cool. And so a lot of times you'll see when they come, then you get the other pests that are actually looking for it's the circle of life, right?
Exactly.
So the grubs come in, and then the other varmints come in, voles or raccoons or skunks come in and looking for the grubs, and and then the circle goes on and on. But again, I kind of digress. But so in the end of March to the middle of May, apply a season-long grub control. That should take care of the grubs and then any other harmful bugs that may get into your lawn. Bill bugs, grubs. There's some moths also that generally infest lawns like this. But that will definitely help, and it's like it says, season-long. So then you don't have to worry about it.
That's fantastic. So doing something right now really isn't going to be a huge benefit.
If your lawn is being dug up by by raccoons, then I would say, to err on the side of caution, I would do maybe a half application right now.
Okay.
Because it's pretty quick and pretty immediate that it will kill those bugs.
Okay.
So I'd put a half application on right now, and then go ahead and put a full application on in the end of May. Okay.
That is a great tip. All right. So let's talk mushrooms.
Yes. And not the crazy kind.
Yes. The kind that just sort of pops up in our lawn, and people always ask about it. What do I do? And can I eat them? Oh boy.
I don't know if you can eat them or not, but I'd recommend you not.
Yeah, absolutely not.
So mushrooms in a lawn, basically what happens is if there's too much water, then that fungus, and either mushrooms or necrotic ring spot are a telltale sign that water is sitting on the top of the soil rather than getting down into the roots. So because of that, at this point in the year, if there's a lot of rain, and especially in the spring when the snow melts, and then a lot of times there's rain as well, then you'll see a lot of mushrooms. If you see mushrooms, it's either because it's got too much water or because that water isn't filtering down into the soil. So at this point in the year, if you see mushrooms, then what I would say is that you definitely need to aerate and stop watering. Yeah. Don't water at all. Anytime you get mushrooms, if you see a mushroom in that area, you need to stop watering at that point, and then determine what the problem is. If there's too much compaction and so the water isn't getting down into the soil, then you're obviously going to need to break up that soil in order for the air, water, and nutrients to get down to the roots. But at this point in the year where we've had not a lot of water, natural water, if you've got mushrooms, then it's probably because you're putting too much water on your lawn. And so you need to stop watering. And then if you see any compaction or compacted areas, then make sure that you break those up before the winter so that you can allow everything to get down into those roots and those roots to kind of wiggle their toes.
Yes. Well, that is fantastic advice. And can you believe that we're out of time for this episode?
It's so crazy. You get me talking about grass and mushrooms and grubs and all that stuff, and I'll just go blah, 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 blah. So drinking from a fire hose, everybody. I hope you're all right. Everybody's drenched.
No, it's such good information, and I'm so glad that you were able to give us some of your free time today and get us all ready, help us get our lawns ready for the winter. It's so awesome. And hopefully next spring we'll have deeper roots and utilizing a lot less water.
Yes, that's awesome. Waterwise lawns, that's the way to go, everybody.
Well, thank you so much to Eric Marble from Chanshare Sod Farms for joining us today. I'm so grateful for his time and his expertise because he really just knows his stuff so well. And it's just so nice to learn exactly what we need to do on our lawns, at every time of year. So I just love the fact that he's so willing to share with us all of his amazing expertise. So that's it for today's episode of Gardening Utah. And as always, let me know what you'd like to see on the show. Send me a message on Instagram. Our handle is @GardeningUtah. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you learned something new. I hope you go out there, you turn those sprinklers off, and you get that lawn put to bed for the winter. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts. Just search Gardening Utah on the podcast app on your iPhone, or you can go to 860kkat.com/garden and listen to our episodes there. Shout out to our producer, Lambo. I'm Jana Francis. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week on Gardening Utah. And remember, grow big or go home.
When you're ready to grow big or go home, make your neighbors green with envy. Get the Gardening in Utah podcast, Gardening Utah, available wherever you get your podcasts and at 860kkat.com/garden.